I was recently asked what I thought about the Giant Trance X mountain bike and whether I could do a review of it. Previously, I've compared the Giant Trance mountain bike with the Giant Rain and an evaluation I created when I decided to upgrade from my old Giant Trance bike. For those of you who are not familiar with the Trance X mountain bike, it's a bike that has a flip chip in the suspension that enables the rider to switch the frame from high mode to low mode. The high mode orients the frame geometry into a steeper fork and seat tube angle, which is more suitable for climbing up hills. The low mode slackens the geometry and makes the bike more suitable for riding down steep hills. When I was evaluating a new bike as a replacement for my old Giant Trance, I already knew that I needed a slacker bike geometry because I had improved my riding skill and was now riding much steeper terrain and getting more comfortable with bigger jumps and drops. I was also looking for larger suspension travel. That is, I had grown out of my all-mountain style Trance and was looking for an Enduro caliber bike, so I never even considered the Trance X, but this viewer got me thinking, had I overlooked something? I should also mention here that Giant doesn't have any unique specialization with adjustable bike geometry. There are a number of other manufacturers that do a similar design. For example, Specialized, Cannondale, and Rocky Mountain, and I'm sure there are more. But I'm doing the comparison on the Giant adjustable frame simply because I'm familiar with those bikes, and I think this evaluation will equally apply to the adjustable frames of other manufacturers. When deciding which bike to buy, the first thing to consider is how and where you're going to ride it. If you're planning to ride all mountain style terrain, such as on an undulating cross-country trail, then you expect it to perform equally well with both climbing and descending. I also think that you'd want it to be lighter and more nimble, and would therefore choose a 27.5-inch wheel. For this comparison, I think we should compare the Trance X with a standard Trance with a 27.5-inch wheel. However, if you're planning to use the bike for more downhill-oriented trails, where steeper and more rooty or rocky terrain is likely, and you may want to do some decent-sized jumps, then you would probably want to look at the Giant Rain, which is an Enduro caliber design. You would also probably prefer the 29-inch wheels for their greater stability and rolling ability compared to the 27.5-inch wheels. So for these purchasers, we should compare the Trance X with the Giant Rain, both with 29-inch wheels. Giant states that the Trance is designed to be equally adept at climbing as for descending, translating into a 50-50 proficiency, whereas the Rain is skewed 60-40 towards descending. So let's talk about the bike geometry and the differences and consequences it has on each of these three bikes. My first thought about adjustable frame technology is that all it does is tilt the entire bike either forward or backward, in other words steeper or slacker, such as I show in this illustration. That is, both the seat tube and the head tube get either slacker or steeper, according to how the chip is set. You can see from this table, which compares the geometry of the Trance X between its low and high chip settings, it only makes 0.7 of a degree in difference, a change that's nearly imperceptible in this illustration. You can also see that the other dimensions have minor changes. So this evaluation is from a desktop analysis of the bike geometry. I don't have access to the Trance X to test ride, but having ridden a standard Trance model for nearly 5 years, I have a good idea what it would feel like and how it would perform compared to my newer Giant Rain. So let's look at the actual geometric specifications as provided by Giant. The first thing I look at is their list of geometric specifications, and I put them into the Geometry Geeks website to produce the following table. So let's look at the main differences in the bike geometry, starting with the Trance X with a chip set in the high position for climbing and compared to the standard Trance. The Trance X has longer reach, higher stack, slacker head tube angle, steeper seat tube angle, and longer wheelbase. The suspension travel is pretty much the same between these two bikes. Therefore, based on these differences, I would say that the longer reach, slacker head tube, longer wheelbase than the 29-inch wheels, which will be heavier and less nimble, will make the bike climb less well than the standard Trance. I wonder if the steeper seat tube angle is enough to compensate for these problems. You'll probably have to try this out for yourself, but I would expect the Trance X doesn't climb as well as the standard Trance. Now let's look at the Trance X in the low chip setting for downhill riding and compare it to the Enduro caliber geometry of the Giant Rain. The Trance X has steeper head tube and seat angles, shorter wheelbase, lower standover and less suspension travel. Except for the standover height differences, I'd expect all these geometric differences would make the Trance X less downhill capable compared to the Rain. My conclusion that the Trance X doesn't climb as well as a standard Trance, nor ride downhill as well as the Rain shouldn't be surprising. While attempting to accomplish both of these goals, since they are contradictory, they are compromises. The Trance X doesn't accomplish both goals as well as a bike designed more specifically for the task. For me, and for the types of riding that I now do, I understand that I want a bike that's more suitable and enjoyable for downhill riding. I wanted a bike that was designed, as Giant states, that skewed 60-40 towards downhill riding. I was willing to compromise for a bike that might weigh a little more and not climb so well, but achieve a bike that was way more confident and fun to ride on steep downhill rips. I knew that I would just have to work harder on my climbs, and I was okay with that. And while the Trance X is a decent compromise between all mountain and enduro bike designs, I still wouldn't want to compromise the downhill attributes that I now have for the Giant Rain. And to support my argument, I have found a survey by Pink Bike that asks owners of adjustable frame geometry which settings they use. Of the respondents that answered that they had it set at steep or slack or somewhere in between, 8,987 riders out of 9,350, or a full 85% of the time, these riders had the chip set in the slack or neutral setting. So if that's the case, why not just buy a proper enduro caliber bike? And alternatively, if you're one of those who left it in the steep mode, then why not just buy a proper all-mountain bike? For you, if it's about efficient climbing, get a bike specific to the task.
The skinny, way up here. Look at that.
I would also like to add that the flip chip is not a completely hassle-free adjustment. In order to make the adjustment, you've got to get your Allen wrench out and unscrew both the bolts and the suspension, flip them around, and then ensure you properly torque them with the proper tightness, especially for a carbon frame. While this may only take a few minutes, if you're riding in undulating terrain or doing laps on shorter trails, you'll need to adjust the suspension both at the top and the bottom of each lap. On a recent outing, I counted 7 times I'd need to make the suspension adjustment. That would eventually drive me and my awaiting buddies crazy.
This is definitely steep and technical in here. Wow.
In conclusion, I'd suggest you think long and hard about what type of mountain bike riding you're going to do, and include a provision in case your skills improve. You might want a bike your skill progression can grow with. But if you're already leaning to an adjustable geometry bike,
Oh, is that ever nice?
I'd recommend that you rent one first for a couple of days and see just how much you actually use the flip chip and how much hassle you're willing to cope with. Well, that's all for now, folks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.